Testing, 1, 2. You okay?
Well, good morning. Good morning. My name is Ron Lambert. I'm the chairman of the Mathews Community Foundation, and I've been asked to introduce our speaker, Larry Chowning. Before I do that, I did want to mention to you that this is being taped on YouTube, and it's being taped and it'll be put on YouTube right after the meeting. And it should appear at the Mathews Historical Museum site. And what was the other one, Judy? The county administration site. So if you'd like to see it later, if you have to leave for some reason, it'll be available. Let me introduce our speaker. Larry Chowning, a maritime historian and lecturer, is author of 11 books, with 6 on some aspect of the Chesapeake Bay heritage and culture. He was born and raised in Middlesex County, Virginia, graduated from Middlesex County Public Schools in 1968, studied journalism at the University of Richmond, which he graduated in 1972. He has been a general assignment reporter at the Southside Sentinel newspaper in Urbana since 1981, and since 1986, a field editor for National Fisherman out of Rockland, Maine, the nation's largest commercial fishing publication. It was shortly after graduating from college that Larry began writing about the Chesapeake Bay region. Over the years, he's had hundreds of articles in print, traveled extensively throughout the Bay region, and is considered by many an expert on subjects dealing with the lore, boats, and traditional aspects of Chesapeake Bay life. His articles have been published in regional, national, and international publications. Mathews County's watermen, boat builders, and people have played a major part in his quest to preserve the heritage and culture of the Chesapeake Bay region. Larry and his wife, Dee, live in Urbana in the home of his great-grandfather that his great-grandfather built on returning from the Civil War. He has 3 children and 6 grandchildren. So please welcome our moderator, Larry Chowning.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been covering the Middlesex County Board of Supervisors for the Southside Sentinel for 40 years, and this is the first time I've been at the head of a table in a courthouse, so this is quite an experience for me. I'd like to welcome you to May Faire 2022, a celebration of Mathews County watermen. It's a program sponsored by the Mathews Historical Museum right here in Mathews Courthouse. We have with us 4 Mathews County watermen and a Mathews County waterwoman who is going to share with us the journeys through their life of working the water, working the Chesapeake Bay, and beyond. Some of these folks worked in the Atlantic Ocean from Maine to Florida. One of them did anyway. What's so interesting about Virginia's bay fisheries is its diversity. The numerous different types of species of marketable fish and crabs, hard and soft shell crabs, oysters and clams and eels, and now we got a shrimp fishery coming. And each has a variety of different gear styles for harvesting, and each fishery has its own fascinating culture to go along with it. Today we have with us on this panel oystermen who have hand-tonged and dredged for oysters, clammers who have patent-tonged and raked clams, and crabbers who have worked in the hard crab and soft crab fisheries, and the winter crab dredge fishery as well. One of the most renowned menhaden captains and Captain Arnold Ripley, a waterwoman with 34 years experience on the water. Unfortunately, Mr. Burroughs is not with us today. I'm sorry for that because that's one of the most interesting fisheries on the bay, the pound net fishery. We have a certified captain in the Watermen's Heritage Tour Program and who serves as president of the Virginia Watermen's Association. And Carroll Melvin Smith, who caught 157 bushels hand-tonging in a day. But what's even more interesting about Mr. Smith is that his family calls him Babe and Baby. And I'd love to learn a little more about that story. One thing that I've noticed over the years of interviewing and writing about the Chesapeake Bay and its culture is that Mathews County has always been in the forefront of where I needed to be to learn and to record the history and the culture of the Bay. And of those I've interviewed over the years, who is going to argue anywhere on Chesapeake Bay that Alton Smith and Edward Diggs knew as much about the history and the process of building a wooden boat than anyone else alive? Who's going to argue that Shelley and Wilson Rowe were as knowledgeable as anyone alive when it came to working a pound net? Who is going to argue that Arnold Ripley Sr., who is here today with us, knows as much firsthand about the changes over the years and decades in regards to the menhaden fishery? I'd like to take this moment to name some of those from Mathews who shared their life stories with me in my books and in my magazine articles. And if any of you knew them, please raise your hand. One of my favorites, Ella Wanda Godsey Edwards of Gwynns Island, whose father named the buy boat Wanda for her. Allie Walton, who worked state gill nets on the York River. Tommy Owens of New Point, whose grandfather raised and killed his own hogs. There you go. And dried their own lard. And they'd cook the fish they caught in a pound net in that lard. They were so fresh, he said, they'd curl right up and melt in your mouth. Charles Lee Forrest, who you're honoring today. Yeah, some of you knew Charles Lee. He shared with me his experience as captain of the Fenwick Isle, and Charles shared his horrid story of losing his boat and part of his crew to the Atlantic Ocean. Robert Rowland Hudgins. Surely you all knew Robert Rowland, yeah. What an absolute delight. Who shared with me that the black men all singing together in the menhaden purse boats were better than any church choir he'd ever heard. Jimmy Godsey, who recalled dredging for crabs in a snow blizzard in 1950. Kenneth Hudgins, who said the only time he ever got scared working the water was when he got back to the dock and started thinking about it. Laurie Hudgins, caught 15,000 pounds of rockfish in one night in a deck boat, Delvin Cay. I'll never forget that interview. Stuart Edwards of Gwynns Island, who worked in the pound net fishery with his father in 1912 in a sail-powered Pocosin-built 5-log canoe. And Swanson Hudgins, whose grandfather did not want to fight for either North, Swanson Hudgins, okay, who did not want to fight for either North or South. So he hid from them by day in the woods, eating chestnuts, and get this, chinkapin nuts. Murray Thomas, who married into the Pugh family of New Point, whose father-in-law used pound net poles in his garden to grow pole string beans. And last but not least, Captain Morris Snow. Please, somebody raise their hand on here. Captain Morris Snow. Captain of the largest deck boat ever built on the Chesapeake Bay, the Chesapeake. And there were so many others. Mathews has just been like home to me. And of course, I'm not that far away. I was born and raised in Middlesex County. And they always opened their doors and their arms to me when I came over to talk to them about their lives and their culture. I'm going to introduce you to the first three speakers and allow each one of them to speak. But if you have a question, I don't want to make this so formal that I was thinking at the end of the three speakers, maybe we'd have a question and answer period. But if any of you have a question that you want to ask, feel free to raise your hand up. We have a speaker stand here if you feel like you want to come up and ask questions and talk to any of these folks. I want you to feel comfortable, and I don't want it to be so formal that all of us don't participate. Let's see what we got here. After the first three speakers, and after we have public comment or questions and all, we'll probably take a little recess to stretch our legs and that type of thing. That's sort of the format of things. The first speaker is JC. I picked him first picked you first because of your significance in today's commercial fishing industry. You represent the future of the Bay Waterman with your approach to diversifying by using your boat to participate in eco tours. And you've also been proactive in your efforts to support the fisheries through legislation and your service as president of the Virginia Water Association, born in 1951 in Diggs.
Yep.
3 generations have worked the water. I hope you'll speak to the past and future of working the water and the challenges that you've seen over your lifetime. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Larry. Good morning, everyone. My name is J.C. Hudgins, and I'm a commercial waterman, born and raised in Mathews. Did work in the oil industry for 32 years, but while I was working in that, we had a very flexible schedule. We actually worked 3 weeks on and 3 weeks off, so that allowed me to participate in a lot of the fisheries in Mathews on my time off. I've always owned a boat. Even when I was working there, I had some people work the boat for me, and other times I would work it myself and keep the gear up. So it's always been a passion of mine to be in the fishery here in Mathews because it is so much heritage and culture here in this area in Deltaville. So I mainly now participate, since I retired in 2005, I participate in the oyster fishery in the winter months from November to March. And I mainly now, since I've gotten older, I mainly now participate in the pat and tong fishery, which is something I can do by myself. If you dredge, you have to have 2 people because with the amount of boats that are on a rock, very difficult to cull the oysters and run your boat and not run into somebody. So that's something I like to do in the winter months. I don't go and push in 20, 30 mile an hour winds like I used to, but I probably work, 15. I think December this year I worked 21 days, so I got a pretty good month in. We had a pretty good oyster fishery. Price wasn't great. It was okay. Everybody made a good winter's work, I think. Oysters are very high now because the public fishery is closed, but private ground, I think people are getting $60 a bushel, so that's a very good price for the oysters. I also crab pot. I've crabbed a little bit this spring. Crabbing has really got me worried. I sat on the Crab Management Advisory Committee down at VMRC, and I told them of my concerns last year. I was very concerned about the population, about where the fishery is headed, and it's really got me worried, and I see it again this year. We got our winter crab dredge survey that's coming back here in a couple of weeks, and I don't think it's good. What I'm hearing is not that great. And, you always have ups and downs, but I think it's something's going on. I don't know what it is. We don't have any fish. Had a good menhaden run this spring. The boys done really good on menhaden gill netting. But your good fish, your mackerel, your croaker, your spot, I mean, it's just no good fish flounder in the bay. I just don't know what's going on. Don't know if it's climate change or whatever it is, but we got some problems in our fisheries, I tell you, because it's not great. Our expenses have gone up. What, Karen? Probably it's probably 50% higher than what they were last year. I mean, crabs are high now. They have gone down somewhat, but it's still a tough life being a waterman. It's tough to go down and make it because the fishery is so much expense involved into it. To do anything out, you have to go real big, a lot of pots, and put a lot of expense out, and you lose a lot of stuff. And so it's a very difficult fishery to make any money in it now. Hopefully things will improve. We'll get through this spell, but I think we got to make some changes on a number of different fronts to be able to see a sustainable fishery in the future, I tell you. Last thing I'd like to talk about a little bit is once I retired, I found a need for people really like to get out on the water and try to learn a little bit about our fisheries in the Chesapeake Bay. And they had a program at the community college where they were letting people go through what they call a heritage tour program. And what that is, we go out and we call it eco tours. And I do 2 or 3 a week from now. Just starting this week, I got my first one, mainly due to weather considerations in May. And it'll run through into September, October. And I get a lot of calls. A lot of them I can't do. It's only 2 of us here in Mathews that do them at the present time, myself and Trey Sowers. But it does, we're on the internet, and I basically take people out. When I do a crabbing, I do 3 different types of tours. I do like a lighthouse tour, a wolf trap. I do a crabbing tour, which I explain the biological differences in the male and the female crabs, and go through the crab pot construction and what the fishery has evolved into and what it takes to fish the crab pots. And so it's a good program. A lot of people just want to do I call it a sunset tour. I got one next Saturday, and they just want to get out. They come into the county, and they stay, and they just want to get out on a boat. They want to go out on a boat, particularly a Chesapeake Bay dead rise. I hear that all the time. Everybody wants to go on a Chesapeake Bay dead rise. And I have a 35-foot Evans, which is a Chesapeake Bay fiberglass replica dead rise. So they enjoy going out and just seeing. They don't particularly want to do a whole lot. They just want to get out on the water. And we've got a lot of historical stuff here with Cricket Hill and Pritchett's Wharf and Gwynn's Island, and Pocahontas, and it's a lot of history here in Mathews. So I take them out and just explain all this to them the best I can, and they really enjoy it. I must be doing something right, because I get a pretty good tip every time. So I guess you just got to be a good storyteller. You got to tell a story, and so the people here can understand what goes on in a little small county like Mathews and what has gone on in the past. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I've cut back a whole lot, like all of us old fellas have. We work. I enjoy going out on the water. Enjoy the fisheries. It's just a beautiful time to go out in the mornings with the sun coming up and being your own boss and working your own boat, coming in when you want to come in. So I really enjoy it, and want to thank y'all for having me today, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that anybody has.
Thank you, J.C. Eugene Evans built your boat. Eugene started out life on Smith Island, and he was in the crab dredge fishery, and then started building wooden boats, and then switched over to fiberglass boats, and he's one of the largest builders of fiberglass Chesapeake Bay dead rise on Chesapeake Bay today. So,
Yeah.
34 years, veteran woman, living in Bohannon. Been associated with working the water since you were 9 years old. She was one of 4 girls in the family, and the only one to choose to follow the water. Followed in the footsteps of your father. What is most impressive is that, along with working the water, you've raised 3 children and been a volunteer in the local fire department for 15 years. Karen, some people do not relate to women pulling pots, working shaft tongs. What is it about this business that took you away from more traditional jobs of working the water? And tell us a little bit about what you do.
All right, my name is Karen Townsend. I was born and raised in Gloucester, a little place called Glass, where I am a family of, I got 3 other sisters, and yes, I was the one that took up in my father's footprints that he had 5 brothers, and all 5 of them were watermen. So I just went with him one day, and I fell right in love with it. It's just one of the things that when you're out there on the water, you get to see that beautiful sunrise and all those beautiful boats that come out. And it's just something that you never forget. So after my father passed away, I decided, I'm going to go ahead and continue this business. So I did. I ended up getting my license and everything and continued it. And At the time, my husband was a clammer. At the time when I met him, he was a resident of Mathews, and that's how I'm over here in Mathews County. His name is Don Townsend. And he clammed, and finally clamming got bad, and he started driving a truck. And of course, I stayed on the water. I worked maybe 200 crab pots by myself at one time for at least 2 years. And then after that, my husband come in the picture and say, "You're no longer doing this by yourself. You need help." So today he drives a fuel truck, and he goes with me in the morning and he works the fuel truck at night. And he got his crab pot license and I got mine, so we got kind of a big rig. And like JC said, it needs a big rig if you're going to continue doing crabbing, because it's steady going downhill, in my opinion. They have put a lot of rules and regulations, coil rings in the crab pots that they thought that would make a difference, but I really haven't seen no difference in it. It's just that, one day maybe things will turn around and things will start to come back to normal like I seen it. When I was with my father, he fished maybe 100 crab pots. And out of those 100 crab pots, he would come in with 18 to 20 bushels a day. That's a difference. So I just hope that it would come back like that. And when I started oystering with my father years ago, there were very few oysters. You had to really, really work. And today, it seems like the oysters have really come back and the crab industry has gone away. So, I don't know.
Are you still working in the oyster business?
I am.
Okay.
Me and my husband, we drudge in the wintertime.
On public grounds?
On public, yes.
And we have public and private grounds in Virginia. One of the greatest things the legislature ever did was in the 1890s, they created the Bela grounds, which was I think 100,000 acres of private ground and 110,000 acres of public ground. It was a great controversy, but as it turned out, we learned that planting and growing oysters was a good way to sustain the fishery. And so you're on public grounds, and you use, I guess, a 21-inch dredge.
Yes, sir.
Do you do any tonging anymore? Is anybody around there doing it?
I have a few cousins at Tongs, but nobody local in my family, no.
Yeah, are there oyster tonging grounds now, JC?
Yes.
What'd you say, Larry?
Are there public oyster tonging grounds still?
Yeah,
Yeah.
matter of fact, I'm really glad to announce that I was telling Carroll Melvin that next year we're going to have a hand tong fishery in the Bianchi Tank. That river's been closed for about 20 years, been designated as a seed river, and we've got plans to open a few rocks there and up in the Great Wacomico. So that's really interesting. It's a new market for us. It's going to be hand tong, and it's going to be quite a few more restrictions on it than what it is in a normal public fishery. But we've already had a couple meetings on it, and don't know if it's going to happen in the fall or the spring of next year, but we'll put some people to work, and that's my main objective, is to keep the watermen of Virginia working, whatever we can do, and conserve the resource. You gotta have oysters. You gotta save some this year for next year, and so I think it's going to be a big help. But just a note, some things I tell on my eco tours is we have three fisheries basically in the oyster fishery. You have a public fishery, a private fishery, and you have the public, you have the private, and they have aquaculture. And we're doing, for the last 10 to 15, 12, 14 years, we average about 600,000 bushels a year. So it's been very stable. And market price, aquaculture prices are good. I think Jack will tell you that. Yeah. And so that's been it's been good. Holds up. Our biggest problem in the oyster fishery is we need more money to plant more shells. We get about $3 million a year from the state to plant oyster shells. You have to put down about 1,000 bushels of oyster shells per acre of public ground. So we can only do about 700 bushels on $3 million. You can only do about 750 acres. And we would really need to do at least 1,000. So you don't repair everything that you do. When you go in and work a rock, and if it's worked pretty hard, it takes about 3 years for it to recover. And that's why we have what we call a rotation schedule. So after 3 years, patent tongue fishery, it's a year-to-year fishery. The patent tongues don't seem to affect the oyster bottom as bad as the dredges do. And the dredges don't do that bad if you don't work it to death. You know, you gotta limit the amount of time that you're on a rock. So that's the big key to it. So if we can get more money, I mean, all these oyster reefs, we're getting a lot of money for that. It's a lot of that going on. Matter of fact, I think they got about $10 million 2 years ago. We got $3 million, they got $10 million. So it's a little disparity in the amount of money that's being spent in the oyster fishery in that respect. I'd like to see more come in on the public side where we can have more public ground, which will put more watermen to work. So that just give you a little idea about the oyster fishery in general.
Karen, you mentioned the fact that the oyster fishery is doing better. And JC, you mentioned the fact that 600,000 bushels is what we caught last year. You correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in 1988, we were down to 22,000 bushels is all that were caught in the Virginia portion of the Chesapeake Bay. So the oyster fishery is coming back. Crab fishery, well, I'll let them tell you about that, but I know the oyster fishery is. And a guy who's caught a lot of oysters over the years, Carroll Smith. Smith, that's a legendary name. Mathews County.
There you go.
Carroll's worked for 74 years in the seafood business.
What do you say?
Still working.
Still working.
I started 1948. 1948 when I started.
You started before I was born.
My daddy tied a piece of rope around my waist, and we had a double rig, and we went to work. And I've been doing it ever since. I ain't stopped. The only time I stop is to paint the boat up, and my boys do that for me.
Did you start
I
as
got
a
to a point where I can't do it. They do it for me.
They do it for you. Did you start as a culling boy?
Huh?
Did you start as a culling boy?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I started at the cutting board with the tongue, and I was tall for my age. And when I was 14 years old, I'll say 14, or maybe younger, I brought my daddy's boat home from Hampton. Never done it before in my life.
14 years
I
old.
was 14 years old. And I brought her, first time I brought her home, I brought her to harbor. Down there, Water Garrett dock. Bought clams and fish. So, I never been in there before in my life. And he told me to go to Hampton. That was about 2, 3 o'clock that evening. I got lost. It wasn't no Chesapeake Bay Bridge tunnel then. I got lost. And sun was going down on me. And I kept looking to the western. And by the time I looked good, the sun had got right over top of York Spit Lighthouse. It was going down over the woods. So I knew I had to go to the west, northwest. So I held a northwest, and I run right into the dock there at Water Garrett. My daddy was there waiting for me. He told me, he says, I could hear you roaring for a mile away. I was running the hard. Dog on me. They had got dog on me, and I was kind of scared too. And raising up, our brother was so young like that. We was gonna come home, and he had the car down there, and I didn't have no driver's permit, so he said he'd drive the car home. So that's why I know I was around 14 or 13 years old.
Gotcha.
And the reason I know it was 48 when I started, that was his first car. He had a 48 Chevrolet. And then I would go down there with him then, but before he before he got a Chevrolet, he had to take a ride to Lee Hall, catch the train to Newport News, then catch the bus from Newport News to Hampton. I couldn't go then. I'll be in the way. But then later on, another time we went back down, and he wanted me to bring the boat home, and that early that morning, and it was pretty. Back then, we didn't have no weather report. So he told me, he said, go ahead and take the boat home, son. So anyhow, I left out of there dark. It was dark when I left out the creek, out the Hampton Creek. And I was by myself. He caught the car home. The back river, I got the back river, York Spit. The wind broke down on me. I mean, she was blowing, I don't know today, if I could remember, about 30, 35. And she was blowing in northeast. And didn't have no bilge pump back there then, them days, and you had to pump above a hand pump. And I was too short to pump the hand pump. I had to stand on the engine box to stroke her. So, anyhow, I got the back rubber. She was hiding the house. And I didn't know what to do to turn around or what. So I knew Daddy was waiting for me when I got home. So I just kept coming.
When you say hide in the house,
She was putting the house under every
going
now and
down,
then.
going down.
Every now and then she put the bow under
Yeah.
real often, but
Yeah.
every now and then she put the house under.
And you were 14 years old
And
by
I was
yourself.
14 years
Yeah.
old and couldn't stroke that pump unless I got on
Yeah.
it. And
Were you all in Newport News and Hampton oystering? Is that what
I
you
was down there clamming.
clamming? Okay.
Yeah, coming home, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it would usually take us 4 hours to get home. It took me 8 hours.
Were you
When I
using?
got home, 8 hours, I was 8 hours getting home. When I got to the boat stake, we didn't have no dock then. When I got to the boat stake, my nerves were tore all to pieces. I couldn't tie the boat up at the boat stake. I had to wait for my dad to come up there and do it. See? And he was scared deaf, word deaf, too, because he didn't have no CB, no radio, telephone, nothing about that them days. It's either you do, you don't. And that was my story there. But then, when I was crab potting years ago, I caught 74 baskets of big jimmies. One day I caught 74 baskets of big jimmies, not counting my million jimmies, and I'll never forget, had 9 baskets of female, because females and jimmies don't work together. When you got a lot of jimmies, they don't work with females after they shed. Well, and then later on in the years, I'd fish my daddy's pots for him, and he'd go to the hospital, I would fish his, and I would fish his crab pots for him every other day. So then I would go to Hampton and go clamming. I would get down Hampton about 12 o'clock, and I'd go to James River and go patting on clam. I would catch 7,000 or a little more than 7,000, and then after from say 1 o'clock until 5 o'clock. Them days.
Is the Pattentong fishery for clams even around
Yeah.
there? It's still around? Still
Yeah,
doing
I'm still
it?
doing it.
Wow.
And I'm 84 years old, still doing it, and I'm proud of it.
Let me ask you a question. You have in your bio that you caught 150 some bushels in a
Yeah.
day, hand
Oh, I
tong.
had plenty. No, I didn't catch a hand tong. I caught it with Pattentong.
Pattentong, okay, okay.
Yeah, 154 bushels one day, and I guess it was about 3 o'clock on my way in. Now, I didn't get them by myself. I had my dad and my boy with me. That's what I got. And one day, the ice came down on me, and when the bay was just about froze over, and I hit this place of oysters. And so anyhow, I worked that morning a little while on them, and I got like 40 some bushels that morning. And I didn't go to work for 8:30, I guess, 8:30 that morning. And I was back at the ice plant, Cricket Hill, Southern Luster Smith. And he bought them from me, and I put them out the next morning. And I went there early next morning and put them out. And
What were you getting for a bushel?
I can't remember that much.
Now what you
Well-
getting today?
No, oh no, we might have been getting, I don't know, $6, $7 probably. $6, $7 back there. Then when I started with my daddy, I remember him telling me we were getting 75 cents a bushel when I was working with him. And he gave me, when I was started climbing down Hampton with him, he didn't know how to pay me, I don't think. So he paid me $40 a week, worked 7 days. 6 days a week. 6 days a week, I got $40 a week. And he said he gonna pay me that much, because that's what the shipyard people were getting working at the shipyard, $40 a week. People working for the government, Fort Eustis, they were getting about $80. I said they would get a little more than the shipyard. And anyhow, I went that way. He would give me, like, nights I go get my supper uptown, he give me $1. He gave me $1 to go get my supper. Well, I walk uptown. It was beer joints and all kinds of joints around there. And I was just a little fella. And I go in the beer joints and sat down on the side of the men that was in there, and the jukebox playing, and you couldn't see hardly see anybody in there for smoke. So, anyhow, I sat up at the bar on the stool, you know, and I ordered me a Coca-Cola, and I drank my Coca-Cola. The man on the side of me, they drinking beer, but I thought I was just as big as they were. Yeah, and then I go to the movies. So another time, I didn't smoke in front of Daddy. Daddy told me I could smoke. One day we sat down and ate dinner. He said, "You can smoke if you want to, because I know you smoke." So anyhow, I was scared to light one up right there. So I went on, and then going in, I always go in that boat house and had a screen door back there then on his house. Had so many mosquitoes eat you up, you had to have a screen door. So I would light me a cigarette up, but I didn't realize the smoke was going back there to him, you know. So then I smoked Lucky Strike cigarettes. So anyhow, the night before that, I put my cigarettes in this man's flower bed, nowhere from the boat. So I was going there that night. Daddy gave me my $1. I was going to get my supper, 60 cents my supper would cost. He gave me my $1. I was going to get my movies that night. Well, then when I got up to the flower bed, the man had dug the flower bed up there with my cigarettes all over the street. I had to buy another pack that night. Couldn't go to the movies. But anyhow, went on back there years ago climbing, and went up Elizabeth River. And I dreamed about this bridge. I had a dream. I dreamt there was all the clams you want there. And I had this dream, years long before then. And I went up there and to that bridge. But I knew about where it was. And me and my boy went to that bridge. I had him with me. And we went to that bridge. And I think the first lick I made, I had like 90. Then I catch up to 200 a lick of pretty clam. And that day I caught 24,000 clams that day. At 2 o'clock we was finished. And then I had to stop for tugboats. I didn't want them to blow their horn at me to move because I knew they would cause trouble. Well, the other boys looked for me and they couldn't find me for a long time. Well, they found me. They started working there. They wouldn't move for the tugboats. Well, the tugboat captains, they called the Marine policemen, and they come back and drove me away. But they have, a lot of the boys went back, but they got in trouble.
Well, you caught some clams that day, though.
But that day I did.
Yeah.
Well, I worked up over a week up there,
Yeah.
boy, you know.
1948,
I started young.
you started young.
Yeah,
But
well,
you said
it was
that was-
when, I guess it was when the good Lord put the clams there and nobody had bothered them. You know,
Yeah, right, yeah.
so I was over seaside, we were, me and my boy. We were over seaside, and I love work over there. You never got marsh grass on one side and marsh grass on the other side. You got about 10 feet of water. And this time I was going down the stream, and I made a lick. And he catch nothing. I said, well, old hard rock there, old Tom come up nothing. So I left it. But next year I went down that same ditch. So I went down there and I made a lick. And I caught one clam. And the boat never moved. There were so many clams there I couldn't get my tongs on them. And when I come up, they were running over the backing. It was clear clam. I was in sand, no shells, nothing. And I counted them, but I forgot my count, what I do with now. But I got pictures of them home. I have a camera, I got pictures of them.
You said in your bio your dad got a car, a brand new Chevy in 1948 was what he caught that year, which was the year you started. Was that with clams?
Huh?
Was that with clams that he caught all those fish? He made all that money to buy a Chevy in 1948?
Oh, no. No, that was 1948 when we caught all them clams. That was, oh, that was back there, probably 80. Probably in 80.
What did you catch in 1948?
I don't know. My daddy kept count of them. I counted them, but he kept count what we had. But it put my guard to the water about that far. I shoot a 42-foot boat. Our guard back stern now would be about that far from the water. So I don't know how many we had, but it was a pile every day.
You've worked in all the fisheries pretty
Now,
much.
I got a picture of that and shows where the water line was on it. Yeah, back there then you had a lot of tar in the water. Where the government chunk overboard, and it had a lot of tar, and it got that tar around the mark around it.
You're a legend in the clam fishery, and I should have gone out with you, but I went out with another legend by the name of Dink Miller.
I know him. You know him, huh? His brother down. His mama would go upstairs and get Virgil. That was his brother, and bring him down, and then go back and get Virgil again and bring him down.
Well, that was
He
Dink.
said-
Yeah, Dink would say that he was so ugly as a baby.
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
There you go.
Anyway, Dink.
Yeah, Dink's a good man. He was a
Yeah,
good man.
he
We
was.
all loved him.
And you all, I went out with Dink and clamming that day, and the camaraderie of the clammers over the radio and what have you. And I think that's in all the fisheries in the JC. I mean, you all help one another out to a large degree.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been through it. I've seen it all so much I can't even remember, and I don't want to remember it.
Let me ask you one
I
more.
don't remember. I can't.
Yeah, let me ask you one more question. Baby, why do they call you baby?
But the colored people down in Hampton, I was so small that they all called me baby. The colored people did. There was a lot of colored people working in the water on oyster boat, bar boats and things, and they would call me baby. Then the wife would come down and get them, and they would call me babe too. They would introduce me to the wife, and they called me babe.
So the family picked it up, huh?
Because my daddy called me baby, see.
Oh, I see.
And then all the colored people heard daddy call me baby. So that's where I got my name, baby, back there them days, but I ain't heard it no more since the old head gone. No, I said that, huh?
No. Yeah, my father's name was Shep, and of course everybody called me Shep in Abana for years and years, and it sort of irritated me a little bit. But when everybody was gone, they used to call me Shep. I was sort of sad that time in my life was gone. I know where you're coming from with baby. Yeah.
Well, they called me Bo.
Bo?
Because where I got that nickname is when I was dredging crabs out there. I didn't know nobody. And I didn't know nobody. And every time we hang up on the vid, Jeff would say, talk to somebody, hey, Bo, that's what I called him. I couldn't think of their name, but didn't know their name.
Yeah.
I called Bo, so they gave me Bo.
I got you.
I got a question, Carmel. You know, I think the clam fishery really evolved because of the heister, didn't it, Carmel?
What's that?
The heister, the design of the new heister that ran off of the main engine, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Because you can remember back, you know, you
Oh,
tell them
yeah.
a little bit about the old rubber
tire
tire
rig.
rigs for oystering. It caught oysters, but it was very, very slow.
Yeah.
It was a lathe rope, one son of the lathe rope. The whole thing
Oh,
go
yeah,
pop,
I
pop,
still
pop,
got
pop,
one.
pop, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
And you could watch the line just
Yeah,
coming
that's
up.
right.
So you couldn't clam it with those because it was too slow. But Carl Melvin was probably one of the first ones to have the heister where you used the rear end out of a car.
Yeah.
You ran a drive shaft to your main engine, and you would put it in high gear, and they were down there clamming in 100 feet of water, and they could bring tongs to the top. I can tell you, it didn't take them long. And it's all about
Yeah.
speed.
But back then, I remember when they had the winding rig on that mast. When I first started going with my daddy now, I didn't work the rig. I went with him called oysters. But I remember when they had the hand rig and with a lot of folks out there dug through the trees, canoes.
Canoes, yeah.
And they had a winding rig on the mast, and man wind them up. He had to wind them up like that. Had two crank handles on them. I remember that.
Yeah, actually in Maryland, we hand tong in this area manually with a hand tong. In Maryland, they allow you to use an electric motor or hydraulic motor to pull your tongs up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something that's a little different between Maryland and Virginia.
But see, this is where they got a 100-pound law at.
Okay.
Nobody don't know about this, but this is where they got a 100-pound law and passed a law on us, trying to pass a law 100-pound tone. And we use a little more. I've been using it all my life, but the hand rig, see, the 100 pounds was all they could use.
Yes, I got you.
They back then that was all a man could use was 100 pounds. Then we got these old donkey engines you were talking about, and then you could put more. You could use a little heavier tone, so they start tying weight on the tone, tying a little weight on the tone. Well, then they found out they could use a little heavier tone. Then they got a little heavier tone. Then the ones that still had the winding rig got jealous. They was the ones that got jealous, just like the grudges today. They're getting jealous over the patent tongues.
Yeah.
Well, they got jealous because they couldn't handle anything over the 100-pound tone. See? Then they got the law passed a 100-pound tone. See, that's where it come from. People don't know that.
And you know they're still enforcing that 100-pound law. Last couple of years, they've been pressuring us quite a bit in the patent tong oyster fishery.
Yeah, but they don't know that. See where it come from. That's where it come from years
Yeah,
ago.
that's
The
interesting.
man was jealous,
Yeah.
and that same way. But a lot of the drudges they're jealous of the patent dog,
Yeah.
and they want. I'll tell y'all something else. You may not like what I want to say. You sit around. A lot of people sits around and talk about there ain't no crabs. What's wrong? It ain't no crab. Everybody wants to know. I can tell them. People take out all the little babies of us and then shoot us older people. Ain't gonna be no on us left. And that's why there ain't no crab because of pillow pots. And a lot of people don't want to hear it, but that's the truth. Until they don't stop the pillow pot, then it's gonna get worse every year. And it's been getting worse every year on account of they keep peeling potting.
Yeah, the peelapot fishery is a relatively modern fishery, actually.
Yeah.
When you look at the length of the life of the crab fishery. They were catching hard crabs and soft crabs, but they weren't really shedding crabs for a long, long time. And then they figured all that out. And that's put a lot of pressure, I think, on the crab fishery
Yeah.
over time. We've gone through now, 3 of our speakers. Y'all are wonderful.
But
Really?
the older head when they started Peel Pot, and I remember when they started it. Where they started, there was a little boy in Maryland. He was the first one to find out about a peel pot, about catching peelers. He put a jimmy crab he was fishing on his dock at his daddy's house. And he took a jimmy crab. He didn't have no bait, so he put that jimmy crab in that pot. And she busted open with peelers. So that's where they started from up in Maryland, setting peeler
Yeah,
pot.
and that's a more effective type of gear than a peel a pound.
Yeah,
Peel
oh,
a pound
yeah.
is a stationary form, much like a pound net.
Right.
It extends out from the shore. It's got a leader and it goes out into a cage, and the peelers, and they come along the side of the shore, they follow the leader out and they get trapped in the cage. Well, that's stationary. But when they went to peeler pots, that enabled them to move all over, just like crab pots to a
Right.
large degree. Before crab pots, there were trot lines.
Yeah, I remember that. You know how to start setting crab pot? They
No,
put them
tell
on
me.
a line. They didn't have a buoy. They take and put them on like a 200-300 foot of rope. And they put a pot here and a little way down that rope, and they have a buoy on each end, and they're anchored. They put an anchor on each end.
And you see, that's
That's
what a
right.
trot line was. A trot line was just a long line where
Yeah.
every 3 feet they put bait. They would tie bait to the line and they would drop it over an anchor on one end and an anchor on the other. And then they still do this in Maryland.
Right.
And they come along with a crab net, and it's an effective way of catching crabs,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's also inefficient compared to the crab pot, which is
Yeah.
much more efficient. And what you're talking about is the transition with the crab pot. They didn't know exactly how to use it in the beginning, so they put it on a line, anchored it down just like they did the trot line, trying to mirror that type of thing. And even today, in some parts of Maryland, they still do that. They still do that
Oh,
type
yeah.
of crabbing, but as we've gotten more efficient with the gear and what have you, it's changed the way we do business,
Yeah.
and it's also impacted the fisheries over the years.
Well, the old people used to tell me, the older people, I call them older people, I was young, but they was old to me then. They used to tell me, and they was into it big. They got into it just as big as any man, a field pot. And they said if they didn't stop it right then, it was going to be the end of crabs. You might as well take a picture of them because it's going to be the end of them. And a crab in here can't say they ain't in trouble, but he ain't gonna own up to it.
Yeah, we've gone about
They
an
ain't gonna own
hour.
up to it, but
Excuse
they know
me,
it,
sir.
that's
Go
it.
ahead. Yeah. We've gone about an hour. Part of this is for you all to talk and raise your hands and ask any questions to any of these folks. Let's go ahead and have a little question and answer period, and then we'll take a little break. You can stand up and stretch and that type of thing. So raise your hand if you want to. You can come up to the podium, or you can do it from your seat. Anybody have anything they want to ask these folks?
A lot of knowledge up here. We appreciate y'all's time. I'm interested in what you started talking about in the beginning, shrimp industry. I happen to be most of my life, and I noticed that I've seen shrimp, pretty good sized shrimp, surprisingly. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, I can. Virginia has had an experimental fishery, which is now, I think, not an experimental fishery. They have made it in, it's 12 boats. They're fishing out of Virginia Beach. It's not inside the bay. It's in the ocean. But Maryland is in the process, going through the legislature, of doing the same thing that Virginia did, except we did it through VMRC. And they're trying to create a fishery up there, and they're talking about Ocean City, off of Ocean City, doing some of it. And also, they're finding out that they're catching a lot of shrimp inside the bay with crab scrapes. And so they are considering, I don't know how far it'll go, they are considering opening a small fishery near Smith Island, Hooper's Island, in that area over there. The way it is, Virginia will never allow a dredge, a trawl. excuse me, a trawl, I say never, never say never, but I would be surprised if they ever allowed a trawl to come into Virginia like they do in North Carolina and off the shores of North Carolina. It's a real small fishery. They're gonna try to keep it small, and, I think this was the first, no, 2021 was the first year, and I think they caught 55,000 pounds.
What is good,
Is it working?
There it goes, yeah. Yeah, this was the second year in the fishery. We do have a couple of the Smith boys on Gwynn's Island. Todd and Lee, they participated in it. One guy up in Reedville, one guy in Pocosin. And first year was really good. Like I say, they caught like 55, 60,000 pounds. But last year, I think it was probably about half as good as it was the year before. And it's, it's just like all the other fisheries, just like we're going through the crab fishery and our croaker fishery and spot fishery. Everything is so dependent on Mother Nature, It just, you just never know. I mean, stuff comes and goes. We have years and years of down quantities, and then all of a sudden they'll pop up like this year. All the menhaden showed up, and everybody was saying there's no menhaden. We're catching all the menhaden boats. We got to outlaw all the menhaden boats, and it's not true. There's not a lot of science out there to back a lot of these accusations, So that's what I'm really into. I think science should control what we do in these fisheries. You got to have surveys. You got to have real world input to be able to find out what's actually going on. So hopefully it'll continue on. I mean, the guys, they have the rigs. It's pretty costly to get involved into it, and and this year was a pretty good conch fishery down off the Virginia coast. That they've done well with that. So some fisheries do good and the other ones are down. So it's never where everything is up at the same time. It doesn't seem like, does it, Karen? I tell you, it always fluctuates.
Yeah, they're working out of 38 to 50-foot boats out in the ocean, so it's a day trip type thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's nowhere near what you see in North Carolina waters with the big trawlers and that type of thing. And they're working a small net.
Mm-hmm.
They call it a tri-net. A tri-net in the big fisheries down in the Gulf and what have you is like a sample net.
Mm-hmm.
They throw it out to see if they're catching shrimp, and then they come in with a 200-foot wide trawl, 2 and 3 on a boat. If they're catching them in a tri-net, then they go get them with the big nets. Well, basically what Virginia has done is they're using a tri-net, which was, how long is it?
I think it's 20 foot wide.
It's 20 foot
20
wide
foot wide,
and
yeah.
4 feet long, I think.
Very,
is
very small, but as small as you can pull.
all.
Really.
But what it does, the other thing it does, and you correct me if I'm wrong, JC, is it's taking pressure off of some of the other fisheries.
Exactly, yeah.
It gives watermen an opportunity to try something else, and that means they're not going after crabs and oysters, which is probably a good thing. That was a good
Yeah.
question, real
Yeah.
good question. Yeah. Anybody else?
Gentlemen, my name's Mike Walls.
Hey, Mike.
On behalf of Mathews County, I want to welcome you all to the Horizon. I do have a question for you, and I've had the privilege of standing on Carroll Melvin's dock and talking to him from time to time. Never the rest of you guys, but welcome. In 1998, I was commercial rock fishing on Chesapeake Bay over off Silver Beach, and I went to drink. That was that whole new respect for the waters of Chesapeake. Can you tell us a story of when you did go in to drink, or one of your mates went in to drink? Thank you.
Well, I've been pretty fortunate. I've never gone overboard, so I don't have a story for you there, and I've never lost a person. Been in some pretty rough weather on the tugs that I worked for many years, and on the fish boats too. But just been very fortunate. You really got to watch it, what you're doing, because Mother Nature knows no boundaries. And I don't know, Carl Melvin, I don't know if you've ever had a situation, any of y'all. No, been lucky so far. So, but it does happen occasionally. When they were talking about closing the Coast Guard base here, we kept an eye on fatalities on the bay, and I think that while this was going on, we had 2 fatalities of drownings in the bay. So it was very important that we keep the Coast Guard base here at Mathews. And fortunately, through all our efforts with the watermen and Congressman Whitman and Mathews County, we were able to keep the Coast Guard here. And so that was, I think that was a big plus this year.
I had a experience with that probably 10 or 15 years ago. We were spot fishing, and the boy working with me, it was rough, and the net was in a hanging boat. We were fishing the net across the boat, and the seas were coming straight at the bow where she was laying. We were side to the seas in a kind of like a rogue wave, just a different sea stroke, and it broke the uprights off the boat, and the boy was in the bow of the boat and carried him right on over the bow of the boat with the net over him, which he was a fireman, so he had training with that. So he was able to tread the water with his oilskins on, and I got back around to knock me in the floor, but I got around, got the boat to him, and got him in the boat. And I'm not gonna say it scared us anymore to be out there, but it gives us a little bit different perspective on working when it's really rough. It's crabbing is different when it's rough crabbing because you're not attached to anything. A lot of times when you're fishing, you have to take a little bit different respect on that because if you're under a net, the net's anchored and the boat is actually hung. So if it gets bad, you really can't get away. As with crabbing or something, you can move because the pot is coming to you. So that turned out all right, but it could have been a bad situation. But you kind of take it as it comes and go on. He still works with me today, so that was my experience with it.
And you were fortunate.
Yes,
Yeah,
very
fortunate,
fortunate,
yeah.
very fortunate.
Anybody else?
Yeah. When I was still a little boy coming along, and I was gill netting. But I went arching that day, me and a fellow named Luster Smith. We went arching that day, shaft hog. We call it skiff load arching. So he had a skiff and I had the motor. So he had the net. So he told me, he said, if you want to, you go ahead and go gill net tonight if you want to. We ain't going arching tomorrow, so he said, go ahead gill netting. So I went down to Cherry Point. Well, I was happy, boy, in that skiff going around there. Got down there off Cherry Point there, I run my net overboard, and so a fellow named John Geyser, he was a real old fellow, and he was gill netting around there too, but he had a sculling paddle, and there was a couple boats there, had boat sticks back there them days, back around that Cherry Point, and they were tied to them. So anyhow, I run my net out, and about 9 o'clock, we always still do it this day and time. About 9 o'clock, we go down. But most times, fish hit about 9 o'clock nights, the first lot will. So anyhow, I went down. I was catching fish. I was happy as I could be. So I got to the end of my net. I took the net and go put it over the outboard motor. And when I did, the outboard motor when I put my weight on, the outboard motor went down in the water overhead first I go. It was 16 feet of water there. Well, I had a brand new pair of hip boots on. I had a brand new oilskin coat and everything on. It was cold that night. So I went overboard, and I had cotton gloves on, The day I was hung up in the gill net. And I to this day and time, I always said, the good Lord save me. I looked, the skiff was about, well, I can look at the picture today, was about 20 feet from me. The wind had blown about that far from me because I was still in the gill net tied up. So some kind of way, somebody helped me get out that net. And I couldn't swim. And I got back to that net, to that skiff, some kind of way, and I got my feet up on the fin of that outboard motor and pried myself over. Well, while I was in the project trying to get out the net, I was hollering for John to come help me. Well, he was a little ways from me. And every now and then, he'd holler so I know which way to come. So Anyhow, when he got there to me, I had just got in the boat. So we went into one of the fellow's boats that were big boats there, and he had a stove in there. We lit the stove and got warm. So that was an experience, and I had some more, but
You're fortunate, we're
I'm
fortunate.
fortunate. The good Lord looked out for me.
We're fortunate you're here today with us, too.
Yes, sir, I am. The good Lord did it.
Yeah, let's take about a 10-minute break. You can stretch and you want to come up and speak to anybody, you're welcome to do that. And then we'll come back and we've got Chris and we've got the legend, Arnold Ripley, who's going to tell us about the menhaden fishery.
You're gonna do the talking next time. Yeah, you will. Oh, you got a lot you can tell. Yeah, you got a lot.
I guess it's pretty that sure came in.
Man. Hey.
Okay, we're going to start back up for the second round. So if anybody's outside, tell them we're getting ready to start up again. Right before we start, I want to mention Edward Grinnell. His daughter came up and reminded me that Mr. Grinnell's came to a book signing for Chesapeake Bay Boat, and we met there, and I did mention that. And he owned the Peggy, which most of you know what the Peggy is today. It's still around, still very much a part of Mathews County's culture. And I just wanted to make sure that Edward Grinnell was one of those folks that I mentioned today. Okay. Colesboro was not able to make it. He was one of the folks we wanted. Was on the panel, but he couldn't be here because of illness. So we're sorry that he's not here. And so we'll go on over. Chris Pritchett. I saved Chris and Mr. Ripley for last because they are two of the panel that I've interviewed before. I had the distinction of interviewing Chris in, I think it was 2006 that we got together, along with his father, Edward. It was an article for Bay Splash magazine, and we had a wonderful time. Your father was extremely enlightening, I'll tell you that. Chris, you're 50 years old, and according to your bio, you're a young man in this business, actually. Am I right? Yeah. Where do you see the business going for yourself and for younger folks like yourself in the business?
Oh, hell, I've done it all my life, so I started when I was young, and over time in this business, you acquire a lot of equipment and knowledge and different things that you need to make a living. This day and time, I don't know how it would be really hard for somebody young to get into this business and purchase everything they needed to purchase, with the prices of stuff. But I mean, it's people that do it. Like I say, it's
a lot of father-sons staying in the business, isn't it? Or
yes,
is it? Yeah.
yes. Like I say, I started when I was young, started in school and done different things over the years. A lot of the fisheries that we used to be able to do have closed, which we used to fish in the ocean. They closed all of that with the shad fisheries and, used to do some shark fishing down there. You can't do that anymore unless you have a permit. They used to be open to anybody. And a lot of regulations on crabbing, a lot of regulations on striped bass fishing. I do that. It's just hard nowadays because everything seems to congregate. So many fisheries have closed, so it puts more pressure on other fisheries that people used to be spread out and everything kind of had an even amount of people working it. A lot of times, I think they put regulations on stuff like the crabbing. The watermen actually probably really aren't the problem with crabbing. There's not really many of us left. It's maybe a fifth to an eighth of what it was 30 years ago when I got into it. But the numbers always seem to go down. But we're easy to regulate. I think, it's a lot of predator fish in the bay. And a lot of that stuff goes unchecked. Things run in cycles. The people that make the laws, it's easy to put a finger on us, but it's, a lot of times it's other factors that they don't want to address. That's my way of thinking, and it's a lot of regulations, a lot of laws that aren't necessary, and laws that don't help, they never take them away. If they do something that doesn't make a difference, they leave it there.
There's a lot of downsizing in the business too, and then I see a lot of folks over my way in Middlesex. They've gone away from the 42-foot wooden work boats, and they're crab potting out of sea oxes and Carolina skiffs and that type of thing.
Yeah.
What are you working out of?
I've got a 25-foot Parker. I've had it for 30 years now, and I've debated over the years whether to get a bigger boat. And at times I could do better with it, but then at times, I might work in 4 or 5 foot all summer long, depending on where the crabs are, because that's basically what I do most of the year. And then now with the rock regulations, they've basically cut out our fishing in the bay. They're kind of shoving everybody into the rivers. They've changed net sizes on us where you can't keep the bigger fish. So it basically makes you go into the rivers to catch smaller fish, and it's actually easier to work in a lot of those rivers in a skiff. So it's pros and cons to all of it, but the smaller the boat is, especially if you work by yourself some, I work by myself some. So it's easier to handle that, and the upkeep is a lot less than a bigger boat.
Well, limit size has also played a role in that. I mean, when you could catch as many bushels as you wanted when Carroll was out there.
Right.
There you're limited to, what, 8 bushels? Is that what it is?
Of oysters, yeah.
Pardon me?
Did you say 8 bushels?
8 bushels.
Of
That's
oysters?
what I mean, oysters.
Yeah.
Oysters, yeah.
And they've separated all the crab pot license now. You have, I think, 3 different licenses where you have anywhere from like a 15 bushel limit to a 47 bushel limit, depending on what size license you have. So they've done it with crabbing also.
They don't have a pot limit? Do they have a pot?
Yes, they have a pot limit. Every license is like what used to be a 500 pot license is 425. That's the license I have. And then they have what was a 300 pot license allows you 255. And then it's, I think, 1 or 2 under that where it's like 150 pots and 85 pots. And of course, the limits correspond with how many pots you have.
So you crab pot, you fish gill nets for rockfish, and you do you oyster?
No, I never have. I've always I used to crab dredge some in the winter when they had that, and I've always rock fished since the mid-90s. And I do soft crabbing. I do the peeler runs in the spring, and do a little bit of spot fishing if that is a good run to spot fishery. But most of the time it's crabbing and rock fishing.
For those of you that don't know, the winter crab dredge fishery was a winter fishery that some of the larger deck boats were used in. And that fishery was closed down for conservation reasons by VMRC, I think 2008, what it was. And so that took away one of the main winter fisheries that the watermen had. And luckily, oysters have come back, and that's helped that from the standpoint of winter fisheries. Anything else?
No, I guess, everybody has different opinions and feelings about working on the water. I've been able to make a good living at it most of my life. I enjoy what I do. Been very fortunate to work with a lot of family. Worked with my father when he retired from the shipyard. Worked with my brother-in-law. Worked with my daughter. She's an RN now. She helped me while she was in school. And now my son's working with me. So, a lot of times life goes by a lot easier if your work is more enjoyable. And you know, it's all work. It's hard at times, but, you know, I've enjoyed what I've done and
You know,
continue to enjoy it, hopefully till I'm too old to do it.
I think, Karen, you mentioned the fact how beautiful it was being out on the water. And there's a freedom and independence that goes, it's scary, it can be scary at times, but there's a freedom and independence in working the water that for people like yourself, I'm sure you appreciate. Sometimes you wish it was a little different because it's hard, but that aspect of it really appeals to a lot of people. And you know, when you think about it, that's how our culture was. Culture in Tidewater, Virginia, the independence of farming, and I mean, that's where we came from, agriculture and working the water, commercial fishing. So, all right, thank you. I appreciate that. Last but not least, Arnold Ripley. 97 years old, was a highliner in the Menhaden fishery for decades. He's among at least 51 Menhaden captains who came out of Mathews County. There was an old saying that I heard, I'm not sure from who. The saying was that when a young man went on a boat, a Menhaden boat, and he was from North Carolina, he'd start out like everybody else, and he'd finish off in the engine room. But when a Mathews County boy finished his career, he was in the pilot house. Captain Ripley, you caught 64.8 million fish in your career. Is that right?
Yeah.
64.8. Tell us about what you've seen over the years, some of the changes, and tell us about some of those fish.
Well, I graduated from high school and I joined the Navy when I was 17 years old. And I spent 3 years in the Navy. And when I come out, I was fishing with my daddy. My daddy was Menhaden fish all his life. And I got my first boat when I was 27 years old. I fished captain of a boat 32 years. I fished the whole coast from Maine to North Carolina and Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. So I've been over a lot of water. To my knowledge, I was the first man to catch 1 billion fish. At that time, we did a lot of it by hand. They got better equipment today. And, you know, she asked me a question. I caught 1,129,000,000 fish in my life, and I think Lawrence Jr. has caught more because he's got better equipment and he caught an awful lot of fish. There was 19 plants on the Atlantic coast. Today there's only one. The Menhaden fish is a very rich fish in oil and the scrap. Scrap is used in your feed. And your oil has many different uses. You want to ask us some questions?
Yeah, Captain Arnold, you fished up and down the East Coast, and one of the questions was, did you ever lose? One of the questions from the audience was about losing anybody fall overboard. Did anybody ever fall overboard in all those years that you were fishing?
I never lost nobody.
Never did, yeah. You were fishing before the power block, I guess.
Fishing when?
Before the power block was invented.
Yeah, everything was done by hand when we first started. We had 29 men on the boat, and after we got the power block to get the net back, we cut back to 17. And I believe now they have 14 on the boat because they got more equipment.
The things they talk about that we don't see today, maybe they still do it, were the chanties, the songs that the fishermen
I
would
used to
sing.
carry a man especially for that. What that happened was when we got a big set of fish, and the man would sing. When he finished singing, it meant that all the men would pull at one time, and that's the reason that we had a shadow man. I got a special man for that. They're singing about women and different things, and when they finish that chorus, everybody pull at the same time.
Robert Rowland said that it sounded like better than a church choir.
Rob Rowland was a good man. He was the strongest man I think that I've been associated with.
Is that right?
He went pilot with me 2 years, and he was a fine fellow.
You were there before the spotter planes,
Before what?
the spotter planes, the planes that spot
Yeah, we
fish.
didn't have any planes when I started. And when we first got the plane, it didn't have any radios. And the plane would come back to the factory and report what he saw, and the factory would tell us what we do the next day. There was no radio in them days.
How'd you do it before that?
We
Crow's Nest?
we went out and we used our own judgment on the weather, and where we thought we could go with best, and wherever the weather was. Take a southwest wind down South Beach would be pulling off the land. But I fished Delaware. I fished 7 years before I went captain, and then I went to Delaware. We started fishing in North Carolina. We had a short season down there, and then we went to Delaware. They built me a new boat. We was high boat there that year, and the factory built me a new boat, the Femme Island, in Port Arthur, Texas. And I fished her, I think, 7 years. And then they built me another boat, the Green Run. And that was the year the fish played out up north. And because I didn't catch, the following year, I told a man I wanted to go in Louisiana because they would catch a lot of fish at Cameron. So we went down there, and then the owner of the factory moved one of his plants to Abbeville that winter. So then we started fishing down there, and we fished there. I think I was there 14 seasons.
You're talking about the Gulf of
Gulf.
Mexico.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We had, of course, I know we caught 30 million fish the first year we were down there. Then we started catching 40 and 50. And then we had 60 one year. And any year that we weren't high boat, we were broke down or something out because we were high boat every year.
What about refrigeration? How did you all, did you carry ice with you and all that when you went out?
We got refrigeration when we went in the Gulf. But the first year I went down there, I didn't have a refrigeration. And they claim I lost 17%. I started fishing in Delaware that year, and then I went to Carroll, Louisiana, and come back went to North Carolina, and we had 24 million. At that time, 20 million was considered a good year, but later on, it wasn't now. And because Arnold Jr. had some big years. One year he had 76 million, so he had some big years out there. I think he's caught more fish than I have. He got better equipment. And then we had certain people invented pumps to take the fish out of the boat, and then if we invented a pump to take the fish out of the net. And all that has come along, and before we were doing everything by hand. So we had, it's been a big change.
Do you remember, and I know you do, but these people have never heard of a striker boat or a striker.
I rode a striker boat. We had 3 men set to the mast, captain, mate, and what we call a dry boat mast. And when they found a bunch of fish, they dropped me off on it, and I had a row standing up. We had a little
And
boat.
you were the striker, right?
Yeah, I was a striker boat.
You
And
go,
when I pointed my oar, I bet that I saw it, and then the captain and mate would come around in front of it and set on the fish.
say that again. You would go out as a young man in the striker boat to spot fish. And then
we found a bunch of fish from the mast, and then they dropped me off on it first, because see, we had no radio, and I rode down to it. And when I saw it, I pointed my oar to the captain mate would come out in front of it and set right.
You were directing the boat.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's been a lot of changes, because nobody doing that today.
There are no striker boats around today.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, I rode a boat 2 years and a half.
Oh, so when did you start doing this? What year?
When I come out of service, 1965, something like that.
45. Was it the,
I went fishing with my daddy,
okay.
and I was with him 4 years, and I went mate 4 years. I was 7 years before I got a fish boat, captain of a fish boat.
And how long did you fish?
What's that?
How long did you fish? How many years?
I think I was captain of a boat 27 years, and I fished 7 years before that.
Well, let me ask you this. That old saying about North Carolina boys going to the engine room and Mathews boys going to the pilot house, is there any truth to that?
I didn't think the people in North Carolina, the captains, would do as good as the people from Virginia. I thought the people from Virginia would do better. Thought the people from Virginia would be better. And when I went to Delaware, when they built that, I was a high boat every year. I was at Delaware, and I was high boat everywhere I went, unless the boat was broke down.
You told me there were 50, you knew of 51 captains that came out of Mathews County. that worked on
Actually, yeah, it was 51 Menhaden fish boat captains, and it's always been in Mathews County, from the steamboat area to the diesel area. There never was a fish boat captain in Gloucester, never was one in Middlesex, but from Mathews, it was full of them, and then they moved over Northern Lake where the fish factory was. And so we had a lot of, it was a way of life here. A lot of people would go fishing fish pounds, and go with me in the summer, and then they go on a boat dredging crabs in the winter, and then then when I got ready to go fishing, they go with me. So that's the way they worked. There wasn't no unemployment that day.
But you didn't do that. You fished the Menhaden boats pretty much. You didn't go dredging crabs and things like that, did you, during the winter, or did you?
I can't hear you.
Did you work in the other fisheries too? Or just
No. I set some crab pots before I went fishing in the spring. We started fishing in May, and we stopped in October up at the beach. And then you had a short season in North Carolina, November and December. We come over Christmas. But when I went in the Gulf, I didn't go to North Carolina. I've been in North Carolina 7 years. When Riva Oil had the first converted boat over to a steamer, they got me to fish it, because I was very much in demand at that time. And then when they had fished the second boat, they got me to fish it in North Carolina again. I had a couple of good seasons out there.
Let's go back to that first boat. Was that first boat was one of the steamers? Was it mechanically had an engine in it, or was it a diesel engine?
I can't hear you.
I said, what was that first boat that you got? How was that powered?
Well, I fished Captain Flem Truce let me have his boat. He had a steel boat.
Steel boat. You're
And
saying steel.
The first,
Okay.
so all of the wooden boats the steamers were wooden boats, because I thought that steel boat would sink fish. Well, Mr. Smith built one first steel boat in Crab Island, the Barnegat, a 120-foot boat. And when they found out that it wouldn't sink fish, then they started building them. So he built 120-foot boats there and 130-foot boats at Delaware, and then other companies would build them too.
When you say sink fish, you're
Steel
talking.
boat, yeah. Because they found out, it's just like first boats. They thought that the diesel engine would sink fish. But I was the first one to use a diesel engine in the first boat. It was a 4-cycle engine because they thought that the GM would make too much noise. But GM it all was all right. All this stuff was tried, and it's just like the man that ordered to fix the pump to take the fish out of the steamer. Then they had a man fix the pumps out of the net on the steamer, and so those same pumps are still used today.
Wow.
And I got a record of all of that, and I'll show it to you when you come.
Okay, that'd be great. Amazing. Amazing.
Well, all our family has been in the fishing business. My grandfather, my father, me, and Arnold Jr. All 4 of us have been captain of boats, and so menhaden fishing has been a way of life for us.
Do you know anything about when the menhaden fishery was under sail? Did any of your,
Menhaden fishing what?
when it was under sail before they got engines and what have you?
I can't understand you.
Sailboats. Do you recall anybody talking about them fishing?
Yeah, it was a little factory at DuPont, and there was a fellow there, fellow Davis. He had a sailboat that he caught some fish, and they, of course, with the purse boats, they rowed around, and the first engine in the purse boat was on Chesapeake Bay River oil. And all of the changes that were made in the pumps and so forth was done on Chesapeake Bay. People on the bay invented everything.
So in the early years, the purse boats didn't have any engines in them, and you all rowed them.
They rode them around.
Right. How many folks they have in each one of those purse boats?
Well, at that time they had 30 or 40 because we could get all the men you want. You know, they were glad to come aboard, get something to eat, and then when they got they cut out to 29 on the boat, and we had 22 men to get the net back, and then when they got the power block, they cut out to 17 men on the boat, and today it's 14.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know, a power block is a mechanical instrument.
Power block is put a net in.
That pulls the net in mechanically.
Yeah.
And that cut down on the number of men that they needed to pull the net up.
That's right. There's been a lot of changes, and Arnold Jr. has seen a lot of it, and I saw a lot of it. And he's caught, I think he's caught more fish than I have.
Well, he had some advantages there.
Was that?
He had some advantages.
Well, he's got better equipment.
Better
all right.
gear. Yeah,
And,
that's right. You'd have hung with him, wouldn't you?
Yeah. It's just like on the bay now, since they only got 6 boats on the bay, and the planes are all sitting. Nobody goes to the mast anymore because I stayed to the mast all the time. He did too. And I went to the mast every morning at daylight, and I operated the boat from up there, and had my radio so that I could handle the boat up there. And
From the mast.
from the mast.
Yeah.
And I found a good portion of my fish myself. And the plane found some, but I'd say 60% I found myself, 40% the plane show for me. But not many people are doing that. Most people depend on the plane altogether.
You worked from Maine to Texas?
Yeah, the first trip we went to Maine, the people up there saw these big boats and thought we was a Russian trawlers up there. And so we anchored, and the Coast Guard boat come on side, you know. Of course, he saw we were flying a flag and hail from New Jersey. And he told me, I had a color crew that was all on deck. He said, I heard you all were Russian trawlers. The fellow said, you must not know much about history. He said, there was a black Russian. No, we've had our way, you know. After that, we started running up there, and we was, I guess, for 15 years or more, we took a little cruise boat up there and going around to different places. And I stopped at this, in this parking lot, and I was talking to this fella. And I told him, I said, we made a set up there and caught a big set of fish, and you told me I had to turn them out. He said, well, I'm the man that told you.
Is that right?
I've been about 15, 16 years.
Is that right? Well, Captain Arnold, let's give the folks out here an opportunity to ask you some questions. Maybe the panel wants to ask you some too. I've run out of questions. So let's open it up on the floor. If anybody has any questions they want to ask Chris or anybody up here. for that matter.
Refrigeration has been a big thing that we didn't have to come in. Because before we had refrigeration, we had to come in every night. It was caught in the fish.
Refrigeration, yeah.
But after we got refrigeration, we didn't have to do that.
And that's helped with the catches too.
That was a big thing, yeah.
Yeah,
Anybody got any questions?
yeah.
What you all said, that's in trouble. What's being done to change that? Are there studies, are there,
Yeah,
Okay, here.
yeah, she was asking about the crab population,
What?
about the crabs, blue crabs.
Oh.
That there is a winter crab growth survey done every winter. It's been going on since 1990, maybe something like that now. And they go out to 1,500 sites, and they supposedly they have a model, a computer model that they go by, and they test these sites and count how many crabs that they catch, the juveniles and the males, the females, and so forth. And we're just about due to hear the results now. We get it in mid-May most of the time. So that's the main science behind it, whether it's right or wrong. It's a lot of discussion of whether it's actually good or not. A lot of times it doesn't seem to correlate between a bad crab survey. You might have more crabs, have good crabbing, and exactly the opposite. Sometimes the survey says it's good and it's not good. So that right now that's the only science we have, and we meet. I sit on the Crab Management Advisory Committee for the state, and we meet about 4 times a year, and we discuss all the changes in the fishery and try to come up with a plan. It's really the fishery is really governing itself, because like Chris said, the fishery has dropped the amount of people that are in the fishery right now. It's probably 700-800 people in the crab fishery, and 15 years ago it was over 2,000. So average age of a waterman is about 56 years old. So you can see it's no young people getting into the fishery, and mainly reasons that Chris give. It's very expensive to get into it. If you don't have a father that has something to pass down to you, a lot of the license you have to go out and buy now. They're like retirement plans for the watermen. So it's been some changes, but I was concerned last year with the amount of crabs was down quite a bit. This year it seems like it's worse than it was last year. So check back in a couple months and we'll tell you what's going on. Yeah, no, it's very, very heavily regulated at the present time. Like Chris was saying, I've only got a 100-pot license, and I can only catch 10 bushels of crabs. But I couldn't catch 5 out there now. I could probably catch 4, maybe 5 bushels a day. That's all I can catch. And maybe some days you wouldn't do that good. So it is a lot of restrictions in place that kind of self-regulate the fishery, and time of day and amount of crabs, when you can keep the females with eggs, what color they can be. So it's a lot of things controlling it.
The economy plays a role in it too.
Mm-hmm.
The economy plays a role in it too. Gas prices are going to keep you from going out there when you know there aren't any crabs,
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
My name is Donald. And I just wanted to go a little bit in there about the question you asked about that's true. My dad went, Captain Ripley, heard the story that Captain Ripley went to my grandmother's house to see work with him, and that was his first job. And today he's a captain. He's been a crewman, he's been a mate, he's been a pilot. And today, he talked about the average age of a fisherman being in the 50s, and there's not many young. Anything is being done to reach out. Seasonal, because yeah. I was wondering when it comes to like Manhattan fishing, anything's being done to attract.
Yeah, maybe I can answer that, and only because I recently attended a career to take a photograph. It was a career planning for young people, and the Menhaden Fishery plant from Reedville, because they're the only ones on the East Coast now, I think. Is it Omega or is it Cook? What do they call themselves now?
Still named.
Omega, they've changed their name many times. But Ocean Harvesters, okay, thank you. I know that they had a booth there, and they had young people coming up, and they were talking about the different jobs and professions that they have within the plant. It's still big business. There's no question about that. It's, I guess it's bigger on the Gulf than it is up here, but only because Virginia is the only state that has a Menhaden fishery now. But I know that they, and the jobs that they offer are good jobs, good paying jobs. So that's happening. I don't know. JC, you know of anything else in regards to that?
One thing that I'm doing with the Watermen's Association is we've been going around to a lot of the high schools with Career Day and working with some people at Workboat Life magazine, and we're trying to. Some people, the college, the school people, as they graduate, they're interested in going into certain fisheries. They want to work on the water, you know. So we've just been going and talking to them, trying to explain to them a little bit about what it is like to be in the life of a waterman. So it's a hard road to get into now, you know, because of the work involved in it and the cost involved. I mean, our costs have gone up 30-40% in the last year, so it's really difficult getting younger people involved into it. But it is some work being done in different areas.
Another point towards that is that commercial fishing is sort of a gauge, and has been for generations, as to the environmental quality of the bay. If commercial fishing comes back, that means to a large degree that the quality of the bay and bay life is coming back. And I think we're seeing that to a lot with the oyster fishery. You know, we talked about 22,000 bushels in 1989 to 600,000 last year. That's enormous. I mean, of course, it's nothing compared to the 7 and 8 million that were being caught, you know, in 1890s and 18. But we're working towards that. And the commercial fishing is much more of a science now than it ever has been, particularly in the oyster fishery, because you got so many guys, young people that are getting into growing oysters. Because, you know, when you can grow them and it costs you a penny and you can sell them for 50 cents, you can make some money, you know. And I'm not sure those figures are right, but I'm just saying that give you an idea. They're selling to restaurants. They become much more savvy than just the days when you had your crabs and you took them to the dock and crab buyer bought them and took, you know, particularly in the oyster fishery, they're selling to restaurants in California, all over the country. Because that was done years ago too. I'm not saying it wasn't, But one of the big things was that Baylor Act, which Maryland's struggling with now. They don't have that much private ground. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't have as much private grounds as we have. And the oyster is an environmental wonder. What is it? They filter 50 gallons a day each oyster. I mean, phenomenal. And so to see the oysters coming back is a good sign. It's probably a good sign for all the fisheries, you know. But these guys are right. They're heavily managed now, regulated more than ever before. And that makes it more difficult. But, you know, it's a scale, and they're trying to figure out, you know, we want to keep the fisheries, want to keep the environment. You got to weigh the different things. And, you know, with the getting rid of the crab dredge fishery in 2008, culturally, that was a difficult thing for the bay because so many of our wooden boats worked in that fishery, particularly our large wooden boats. That was the last venue where large deck boats, were working in the bay. So that, you know, we lost a portion of our culture. But on the same side, if you look at it from an environmental standpoint, you know, it's all how you look at it. You know, it's probably a good thing. I may not agree, but anyway, you got to weigh it. This has been wonderful. Anybody else have any questions? Yes.
I think it's a possibility. You know, it all happens down at VMRC, a state commission. It's going through some changes now, and I think it's some changes for the good. We've now got 2 watermen out of 9 people on the board. We do have 2 watermen. We didn't used to have any. And can you imagine, you know, watermen that work on the water have no say in their future or what they do, you know. So we got 1 waterman from the Northern Neck, and we just got 1 from Reedville on there. So it's been some changes in the board. They normally try to have a diverse people on the board, like they would have an environmental person, they'd have maybe a Menhaden person, like say 2 watermen, a seafood processor. So they want to get a good broad spectrum of what the people feel, how they feel about different regulations. The commissioner's job is just it's an acting commissioner at the present time with the change of leadership in Richmond. We're waiting on the announcement of a new commissioner. Got the deputy commissioner now, Justin Worrell, is doing a great job. I've talked to him several times. He seems to be doing okay. I don't know if he's going to get the permanent job. This is 5 months into the administration's startup here. So you'd think something would be announced here in the near future. But I think crab dredging, I know it's a lot of support, you know. The main thing on that was they put triggers on it. When they closed it down, they said that you had to have 3 consecutive years of 220 million female crabs in the Chesapeake Bay. So that's very difficult to do. Like say, if this year, if it comes out, say, the survey says it's 170 million crabs, well, then you got to start all over again. If you have 1 year out of the 3 that doesn't make the 220, the trigger won't come into effect. So being as cynical as it is, the crab population, it's really difficult to be able to get those numbers, and it's never unattainable. We did have a trial fishery here about, I think it was about 6 years ago. We had 4 guys went out. Jimmy Dean on Gwynn's Island was one of the people. They had 4, and they done very well. They caught some crabs. It was strictly regulated. they could only catch, I think it was 75 bushels, 50 bushels a day, maybe, something like that. So it's to me personally, I think it would sustain a drudge fishery for a limited amount of people, say, 20, 25 people, with a certain amount of crabs, a limit on the amount of crabs you can catch, But it would certainly take a lot of pressure off the oyster fishery. And but now nobody's got the boats, nobody's got the rigs, the platforms. Everybody's gotten rid of it, So it would really be difficult and very expensive for people to get back into it. So I guess we'll just have to see how things fold up.
Thank you. Well, it's 1 minute to 1, and they told me to finish up at 1. So I think we ought to give all these people a big round of applause. We thank you for coming out, and thank you for being a part of this panel. We really do. And appreciate everybody that stayed the 2 hours, but it was well worth it. Thank you.